Today we'll be solving October-November 2024 paper 4-1 and we're starting with question number 1. So I have already copied the source files into the directory, and in order to create a directory, we just right click and we go and we create a new directory, and then inside the directory we just right click and then we create the Python file. So like this, I made Python p1 question1.py, and then we have the evidence file. So we won't be filling that for now. It's very simple. Okay, so they're saying a class declaration can be used to declare a record if the language does not support arrays. A list can be used. Open source file to answer question 1. The file is called data.txt. Okay, so I'm going to open data.txt, and this data.txt has a lot of colors here. Okay, and there are a total of 45 lines. All right. Then in the second part, they're saying the program sorts the string data using data items. Each data is on a new line in the text file. Read data, a local array of strings that can store 45 items, reads each line of data and stores it in an array and then returns the array. So we have to just simply read the data and we have to put it at every index of the array, and then we have to just return the array. So how do we do this? We'll write define read data like this, and they're not asking us to pass in any parameter, so we don't have to. Has a local array, so let's call it contents. Contents would be initially empty. Then they're saying read each line of the data. So we're going to open the file. Open, the name of the file is data.txt. we're going to open it in read mode, and then we'll use a simple for loop for line in f. You can use any variable here, and then we'll say contents dot append, and we'll add line here, and then they're saying that we have to return the value of the array, and that anything else has a local array. And we should also add try and catch here, so we'll say try the whole code, and if there is some error with file, so we should print maybe file processing error, and that's the whole thing. So we get 6 marks for this. We move on to the next part. The function format array takes an array of strings as a parameter. Okay, so we'll hide this for now. Okay, so define format array. This is going to take an array of strings as a parameter. So let's call it contents because we use the same name. It's fine if you are not using the same name. So we pass in that, and then it concatenates the contents of the array into one string with a space between each array element. Okay, so let's say we have these colors. So what we have to do, we have to just print them in one line, scarlet, silver, like this, with a space in between. And we're assuming that they'll all be in an array right now. Let's say if we want to test our program so far, if we are actually getting the values in the array or not, so we should create a main function. Again, they've not asked to do it, we're just doing it for our satisfaction. And let's say it's returning the contents array, and then if I print the contents array, I should be able to see all of this in form of an array. Okay, let's see. Okay, here we go. Right, but we can see the slash n is still there, so that means we need to get rid of the slash n, and for that we use dot strip method, and then we run it. Now it's fine. Or the other method can be, you can just open the file and you can say file.read, and then you can just directly split it in one line. So this one line is essentially doing this, what I'm doing in 2 lines. Totally up to you, however you want to do it. Okay, so in the next part we are passing that array, and then they're saying that you have to just put it in one line with the string and return the string. Okay, so in order to do that, we just need to get all the values in the array, right? So let's say for color in contents, we are going to append this into a new string, so there should be an empty string. Let's call it output maybe, or message, yeah, or just let's call it output message, and this should be empty initially. And then every time what we have to do is we will say output message is equal to output message plus the color. So since they are string values, so they will literally get joined in Python. plus will join two strings. So initially the color would be, let's say it's beige, so first time output message would be beige, like this. Then next time it would become beige and green. We have not added a space yet, okay? Then it becomes beige, green, scarlet, like this. Every time it will keep on adding one color. You can use this for loop, this for item in an array, when you just have to get all the items in the array regardless of their index. If you need the index, so we can just use a simple one for I in range of len of contents, and then here instead of color we can just catch a value in colors, contents index I. But that is needed when you need specific index, otherwise it's fine. So output message is equal to output message plus color, or you can just write plus equal to color. And we need to add a space as well, so plus a space at the end of the string. Okay, then they're saying that we're supposed to return the string. So once the for loop ends, we need to end the string, so for return output message. Okay, then they're saying the main program will call the read data and stores the returned array, so we've already done that. Then they're saying calls format array with the returned array and outputs the returned string. So we are going to call format array with contents, and then we are going to return the output message from here that we're returning here, and let's print the output message. So this should all be printed in one line now. Yep, it says beige, green, scarlet. So let's open the file. The first color is beige and the last one is sage. So from beige, let's go to the last one, that is sage. That means we have done it correctly. Okay, this is also done. Then we move on to, so then they're saying take a screenshot of your output. So in order to take a screenshot, you'll open the snipping tool and you can simply extend this part, and you can also just take a screenshot of this part first, and then you'll need another screenshot to get the remaining values. So this might be 2 or 3 screenshots since it won't fit on one line. Okay, next part we have compare strings. So we'll hide these. Okay, so compare strings, define compare strings. They will take two strings as parameters. Let's call it source1 and source2, like this. And then they say compare each string one character at a time to identify which string comes first alphabetically. If the first two characters are the same, the second character of each string is compared. This continues until the two characters are different. The function will return 1 if the first parameter comes before the second, or 2 if the second comes first alphabetically. Okay, an example of this could be, let's say if I call the compare strings method and here I pass in two values. Let's say I pass in maybe FIFA and Call of Duty. So we know that C is alphabetically before F in the alphabet. So this is going to return true, right? Let's say if I call it again, but this time this is COD and then this is FIFA. So now since for the first parameter comes before the second alphabetically. Okay, since C is alphabetically before F in the alphabet, now we're going to return 1, right? Whichever word will be the one that comes first alphabetically would be will return the number of that parameter. Okay, then another example is they're saying you keep on checking until two characters mismatch. Let's say we have another word, maybe we have let's just write mobile, and here we have another word mobiles, right? Okay, now maybe mobile, like this. So M-O-B-I-L-E, they're both matching, but now here we know that E is alphabetically before S. So in that case we are going to simply return 1. Or if I had changed this to Mobilab, let's say, since B is alphabetically before E now, so this would return 2. That is what we have to do in this program. Okay, now in order to do this question, they have not really told us if the strings would have the same length or not. And we can also see in the file that they do not have the same length. So we cannot put some sort of a check based on the length of the strings, right? Instead, what we can do is, since we are creating a function and we are using the return keyword, that would instantly terminate the function. So we can just use an infinite loop, and then it would end when either of the words is it has been has been checked for um, coming before alphabetically, right? So we'll use an infinite loop. In Python we use while true for that. Okay, and then we check. Okay, so they've said that you do not need to convert them in lowercase. Where was this written? It was written somewhere here that you do not need to convert them to lowercase. Okay, anyways, so we check one character at a time. Okay, now how do we get one character at a time? We'll use index just like how we do it in arrays. So we'll set the index to 0 and I'll get each character out. Let's say character 1. Character 1 is equal to string 1 idx, and then character 2 is also source string 2 idx. What does this mean? So let's say if I run this compare strings, and if I pass in words die and dye, what will this do is first it will get the characters at index 0, which would be d and d for both, and then I'll check if they both, if character 1 let's say is less than character 2. So in string operations, when we say if a character is less than 2, it means that we are comparing their ASCII values. Let that is this character alphabetically before this character. Okay, so you don't have to do anything else. It's a simple comparison. If that is the case, we'll return 1. Else, if character 1 is greater than character 2, that means if the character 1 is alphabetically after the character 2, or they've said if the second parameter comes before, so we'll like this, if it comes before character 1, so the value of character 2 is less than character 1, so we are going to return 2 like this, right? This should be elif. And then what we have to do is we have to go to the next characters. In order to go to the next characters, we'll simply do idx plus equal to 1. Okay, so what has happened? What's happened here? So die would get copied here, die and dye gets copied here. We start the index from 0. We get the first character out, which would be d and d. We'll check, is d less than d? No. Is d greater than d? No. Then we'll do index plus 1. So now next index would be 1. So 1 we have I, and then we have y. So here we'll get I, and in character 2 we'll get y. Now is I alphabetically before y? Yes. So this will return 1 and then the whole function ends. And in some other case, maybe I make this dye and I make this die. So then since character 2 is less than character 1, in this case I would be before this y, so it will return 2. And then until and unless we do not see characters that are different, this loop would keep on working and we'll keep on going to the next index. And the reason this infinite loop would not cause us a problem is because we will eventually return the value. If we had not returned the value, then this loop would have never stopped. So this is the simplest way of doing it. Okay, moving on to the next part. So we have done compare strings. So this was a very simply explained question. There were no issues. So the function bubble will take an array of strings as a parameter and sorts the data in alphabetical order using bubble sort. The bubble sort uses compare strings to compare each string. Write the code for bubble. Okay, so it will take an array of strings as a parameter and sorts the data in ascending order. Okay, so we just have to write the simple bubble sort. Okay, so we'll write define bubble and we'll take a string array here, which would be, let's call it contents, as we were calling it contents before. Okay, then we have to simply use a bubble sort now. Okay, so now
we're done. Our array is
okay, so now we have tried code for bubble sort. So in bubble sorting, what happens is, just a quick recap. Let's say we have an array with 2 and then 5 and then 30. So what we'll do is we'll compare 20 and 5 are out of order, so we'll swap them, 5, 20 and 30, and then this array would eventually be sorted. But let's say we have a 1 here as well, so since 1 is also out of position, so we'll then again swap these values and we'll get 1, 5, 1 and 20. Now once the number of iterations have completed for the length of the array, which is 3 right now, so it is guaranteed that last value will be sorted, right? Or the nth value will be sorted. By nth I mean the number of iteration. So if the loop has completed once, then the last value would be sorted. Now we redo the same thing. So now 1 and 5 would be swapped, and then we check it again. So 1 and 5 and 20 there. So the array has sorted at this point, right? But still, if you're using a simple nested for loop, so now we can guarantee that last two values are sorted. Then last 3, last 4. So basically we don't have to look at these values again. Once an array values have been sorted, we can just simply ignore them. So this was a quick recap. Okay, now in bubble sort, what we're going to do is we're going to use a nested for loop. So for I, so we'll look for the array for I in range of length of contents -1. Okay, the reason we are doing -1 is because when we were talking about the array example below, we have to keep that in mind that we'll always compare the current value with the next value. So if we go to the last element and then we try to compare it with the element ahead, then there is nothing ahead of it. So this would be wrong. So that is why we have to stop until the second last. We have to stop at the second last value to make sure that doesn't happen. For I in range length of contents, this should be -1, and then we have to make sure that we are comparing each value with all the values, and then we're also reducing the number of iterations, because we know whenever the array is sorted, iterated once throughout, then the rightmost value would be sorted first time, then right 2, then right 3, then right 4, then right 5. So we don't need to look at those values. So I'll simply say for j in range, we should just use a variable at this point. len is equal to, or contents length is equal to length of contents. So here we'll have the contents length, and then I'll say contents length minus I -1. Okay, meaning of this is if the loop has ran 4 times, then that means I wouldn't be looking at the last 4 values. Or if the loop ran once, that means that one rightmost value would be sorted, so I do not need to look at that. So if the array is from, let's say, 0 to 5, so this loop will run from 0 to 4. We won't look at the 5th value, which would be yes. And then if the loop has run, for every time the loop runs, we are just reducing the iteration by 1, because we won't be looking at those sorted values again. And here we simply call in the compare string method that they've asked us to do. So use the compare string method to compare each string. So we'll just get that compare string. Okay, so we have to compare the values at the current index with the value at the next index. So contents j comma contents j plus 1, and then this will return some sort of result. Let's call it response. Okay, so how do we know that the current value is larger than the next value? So we had designed it that way. If the current value is, let's say, larger than the next value alphabetically, so we are going to return 2, and that is what we're going to check here. So if response is equal to 2, then we are going to sort the values, and in order to sort the values, we'll just swap them. So in order to swap them, I'll write contents index j comma contents index j plus 1 is equal to contents j plus 1. Okay, what does this mean? It simply means that the value at the next index will be copied at the current index, and the value at the current index will be copied at the next index. So this is just one quick line of code to actually swap both values in the array. Or you can do it in 3 separate steps. You can introduce a new variable called temp, and then you store that in this, just the pseudocode way, and then you swap the values and you bring back from the temp. But if you're using Python, so this is a much simpler method in Python, and then outside the loops we are going to return the value of contents, and that's it. Then the question is saying that you have to call the bubble sort. with the unsorted array as the parameter. So I'll do it. I'll say bubble and we'll pass in the contents, and then they're saying call format array with the sorted array and output the return string. Okay, so let's call it contents and then format array contents, and then we're going to print. And if I run it now, hopefully, okay, yes. So from beige to sage, we have amber, aqua, azure, etc. And this is all sorted in the perfect order. Okay. So this is the whole question one, and then we have to put this into the evidence file.